With great power comes great responsibility. But when it comes to the chairman of the WWE, one of the most powerful business people alive today, Vincent Kennedy McMahon, does not come close to understanding this statement. From putting his performers at risk, showing complete disrespect to his employees, incorporating his sick fantasies by blending kayfabe and reality and incidents so dark that it would make your skin crawl, we'll explore the most heinous things Vincent Kennedy McMahon has ever done. The money-hungry chairman of the WWE would go to any lengths to earn more cash. As long as the price is right, Vince is ready to venture further and deeper into the darkness. A strong example of this is the 10-year deal that Vince signed with Saudi Arabia, a country known for their poor women's and LGBTQ rights, as well as other political issues. When the news broke about the deal, the WWE received significant backlash from the public, but Vince didn't care, since he was making a mammoth $500 million in revenue, so for all he cared, all morals and ethics could just go down the drain. To recap just how bad the Saudi situation was, well, women were not allowed to have any matches till the Crown Jewel pay-per-view of 2019, after which the female performers would be allowed to perform, but only after making sure everything other than their face was covered. Also, let's not forget Sami Zayn, who was arguably the most entertaining member of the Bloodline in 2022, and who received insane reactions from the crowd, was banned from entering Saudi since he was of Syrian ethnicity, even though all the other members of the Bloodline made an appearance at the event. We are still not done talking about the Saudi deal, but for now, let's go back a few decades to 1997, just a day before the In Your House Bad Blood pay-per-view, when Brian Pillman was found dead in his hotel room. On the next episode of Raw, the WWF mourned the untimely death of Brian Pillman, with segments showcasing Pillman's life and career. But Vince had other plans in store for the night, and was not about to let go of this opportunity to make a quick buck. In a segment on the show, Vince would interview Brian Pillman's widow, Melanie Pillman, on live television. Already burdened and shocked by the sudden death of her husband, Melanie wasn't in the right state to give an interview, as she was crying and sobbing throughout the segment, as McMahon pushed on with the questions, which made for a very discomforting scene. And Vince was criticized by many for disrespecting the grieving family. But don't think for a second that McMahon's hunger for the riches diminished even a bit, as just after 2 years, he would do something even more horrible. On the Over the Edge pay-per-view in 1999, another tragedy befell the company when Owen Hart fell 78 feet from the rafters to the ring below in a horrible stunt that went wrong. Owen would pass away immediately from the impact as the WWF announced on live television that Owen Hart had died. We understand accidents can happen in any show, and even if all the necessary precautions are taken, things can go wrong. But the way Vince handled the situation after the tragedy is truly shocking. Instead of becoming overcome with grief or shock and stopping the show then and there, Vince continued the pay-per-view till completion. So surprisingly, all the scheduled matches continued, even as Owen Hart's blood was visible on the ring mat, where his body made impact from the fall. As Vince was critiqued for this controversial decision, he would provide only one excuse. He continued the show because he thought that's what Owen would have wanted. Vincent Kennedy McMahon has always been willing to go to extreme lengths to grab viewers' attention. No matter the cost, he's ready to pay it if the rewards are even greater. But what was Vince willing to sacrifice? The answer is his own family. Sure, the McMahon family feud might look like just another storyline with on-screen drama, but the characters involved were Vince's real-life family. Maybe that's what made these storylines so compelling. There was a very thin line between reality and fiction, and Vince didn't seem to have any qualms about crossing it, even when it meant involving deeply personal and uncomfortable situations. There were segments where Vince made out with women like Trish Stratus, while his wife Linda sat there catatonic. Or the time he forced Tori Wilson to undress him before revealing a disgusted Linda. Then there was the storyline where his daughter Stephanie slapped Linda and called her a conniving bitch. And when rumors were swirling about the chairman's marriage troubles, He took things up a notch by demanding a divorce from his wife on live television. And let's not forget the cringeworthy moment when Vince choked Stephanie with a pipe during an I Quit match. But for Vince, this was barely scratching the surface. Everyone knows that Stephanie McMahon married Triple H, and in 2006, Stephanie became pregnant. Vince wanted to use this angle as part of a storyline, and so he proposed to Stephanie that it be revealed the father of her baby was not Triple H, but Vince himself. Stephanie strongly objected to the idea, and so Vince then suggested another angle where her brother Shane would be revealed as the father. Stephanie was disgusted by both ideas, and the storyline was dropped. This situation leaves everyone wondering, even if it's just storytelling, what kind of man would create such storylines involving his own family? For a company promoting an anti-bullying campaign, it's ironic that the person at the steering wheel is probably the biggest bully of them all. One of the most well-known victims of Vince's bullying was none other than the voice of the Attitude Era, Jim Ross. JR, who had spent decades with the company, through thick and thin, was subjected to bullying by Mr. McMahon. While most of it was off-screen, there were segments where shades of Vince's bullying of JR would be featured on the air. In 2005, when Jim had to undergo colon surgery, Vince thought it was a great idea to feature a segment on Raw where he would perform Ross's surgery with a hot nurse and a character called Dr. Heinous. JR would recall that his wife was in tears when she saw how Vince had ridiculed her husband on live television over such a serious issue. Again in 2012, when JR was suffering from Bell's palsy, a disease where the facial muscles in one's face involuntarily contract, Vince would make a mockery of JR's condition in a backstage segment. Many on social media would criticize McMahon that there was nothing funny about the segment, and shamed him for his lack of empathy and disregard for JR's medical condition. But JR wasn't McMahon's first victim. Howard Finkel had served as WWF's ring announcer during its golden age, and is best known for coining the term WrestleMania, and for his iconic announcing style, which became synonymous with major wrestling events. Despite his significant contributions to the industry, Finkel was not immune to the more unsavory aspects of the wrestling world. In interviews, including one with Paul Bearer, it was revealed that Finkel, described as a gentle-hearted individual, faced bullying from Vince McMahon. This bullying included humiliating scenarios where Finkel was forced to eat sardines and participate in tuxedo matches, where he would be stripped down to his underwear. This goes to show that no matter how important a person's contribution was to the business, it didn't shield them from Vince's bullying or earn them any respect. Vince doesn't give a damn about the well-being of his performers. At least if they aren't the top stars of the company, since in his eyes, everyone else is expendable. Going back to the final Saudi incident in 2019, Vince would show his true colors when his employees needed him the most. After the Crown Jewel pay-per-view of 2019, around 175 WWE staff, including wrestlers and other crew members, were left stranded in Saudi for 6 hours because of an airplane malfunction. There were also rumors that it was the Saudi government taking revenge on the WWE because the company cut off the live feed on the show in Saudi Arabia because of delayed payments. Whatever the case may have been, Chairman should have been at the forefront, taking responsibility for the safety and well-being of his performers. But no, what did he do? Vince left everyone stranded there while leaving the country in his private jet. Just 1 year later, as the pandemic impacted businesses worldwide, WWE was also forced to close its doors to live crowds. Though it quickly became apparent, the company could be forced to endure some short-term financial strain. So Vince McMahon concluded that the best course of action would be to fire a large number of wrestlers at a time when it was nearly impossible for them to find work, leaving them vulnerable and without any source of income. Now, it still would have been understandable if the WWE had been in a bad situation financially, but that was not the case at all. So while the management and shareholders were enjoying profits, the unemployed wrestlers were worried if they would be able to pay their bills. If you're looking for wrestlers who were treated badly while McMahon was in charge, There could be no better example than the straight-edge superstar, CM Punk. Punk was vocal about how the company screwed him in every direction, from bad creative decisions to working him even while he was sick and injured, completely killing Punk's love for the business. But apparently, the worst was yet to come. When Punk took a break from the company after the Royal Rumble 2014 pay-per-view without informing anybody, the WWE suspended Punk for 2 months. But as the months went by, WWE started ghosting Punk, and so it was assumed that both parties had informally parted ways. But Vince was just waiting for the right opportunity to hit Punk when it would hurt most. CM Punk finally received his official termination letter via FedEx on the day of his wedding. This would infuriate Punk to no end, and he would declare that the WWE had pushed him too far this time. Vince would answer to Punk's allegations, referring to it as an accident made by the legal team and that it wasn't intentional, and even apologized for it, but CM Punk wasn't buying it, since the package was sent in overnight delivery, which made sure it arrived on the next day. Another superstar who often received the short end of the stick in the WWE was Dean Ambrose. Ambrose found himself repeatedly forced into bad creative decisions that hurt his character, but he still kept pushing forward. That was the case until he realized just how extreme Vince McMahon's ideas could be. On an episode of Raw, Roman Reigns delivered a heartfelt segment where he shocked the world by announcing that he had leukemia and would need to take a break. This was the same time Ambrose was scheduled to turn heel, and WWE decided it would be a great idea to use Roman's medical condition to generate heat for Ambrose. Just a month later, Ambrose delivered a promo where he talked trash about Reigns and his health condition, but it was clear he was uncomfortable, even twitching. And if you think this was bad, you have no idea what transpired behind the curtain. Years later, on Chris Jericho's podcast, after Ambrose had transitioned to AEW, he spoke about the same promo. Moxley claimed that the promo Vince McMahon gave him was so bad and horrendous that he instantly refused to do it. He explained that the content was so offensive and disgusting that he wouldn't even reveal it on the podcast. Moxley also mentioned that if the promo had aired, WWE would have likely lost sponsors. To this day, we don't know what Vince came up with for that promo, and to be honest, it's probably better that we never find out. If you were active in the workforce in the early 2000s and didn't work with the WWE, you should consider yourself lucky. Because if you were an employee of the company, you could have easily found yourself in Vince's Kiss My Ass Club. In the early 2000s, Vince would start a segment forcing his employees to literally kiss his buttocks on live television and in front of thousands of people. The segment was inaugurated by William Regal, who had to kiss Vince's cheeks to save his job. Then there was good old JR. Apparently JR's bullying and ridicule weren't enough, so he had to kiss Vince's butt. And even top stars like the Heartbreak Kid wasn't immune to this bizarre segment. Even if the argument is that this is television, even if it's just a show, these are still Vince's real employees whose lips are making contact with their bosses behind week after week. If all these incidents weren't bad enough, the next one is absolutely vile. At WrestleMania 21, Edge won the first ever Money in the Bank ladder match, holding the briefcase for months until finally cashing in on a vulnerable John Cena on the New Year's Revolution pay-per-view of 2006. To celebrate the Rated R Superstars Championship victory, Vince McMahon came up with the idea of having a live celebration between Edge and his then-girlfriend Lita in front of a live crowd. Lita would reveal on a Twitch stream that the segment made her very uncomfortable, that she had gone to the chairman before the show pleading with him to hold off on the segment, and even received the support of Cena, Edge, and other crew members backstage. But Vince would not budge. And in fact, he had threatened Lita that if she refused, then she would be fired from the company. But even this pales in comparison to the next incident. Ashley Massaro quickly rose in the ranks of the WWE after winning the 2005 Diva Search, captivating fans with her edgy rock star persona. But her 3-year stint with the company left her struggling with significant mental health issues. Ashley claimed that the company denied her proper training, forced her to work while being injured, and hid the risks of injuries from her that could have resulted in neurological challenges. The most shocking allegation came from Massaro's 2006 WWE tribute to the troops touring Kuwait. She claimed that after falling ill and being taken to a U.S. military airbase for treatment, she was raped by a doctor. Allegedly, when Ashley spoke of the incident to Vince McMahon, the chairman told her to keep quiet about it because the company didn't want to jeopardize their relationship with the U.S. military. Ashley took part in a class action lawsuit against the company 10 years later in 2016, but the judge dismissed the case due to expired statutes of limitations, and Massaro had even apologized to the company for taking part in the lawsuit. But in 2019, Ashley succumbed to her mental health struggles and took her own life at just 39 years old. Stone Cold Steve Austin was the undisputed ace of the WWF during the Attitude Era, with star power that was unmatched. Off the screen, Austin was married to Deborah Marshall, who also had a stint working with WWE. However, in 2002, their marriage took a dark turn when Austin was arrested for domestic violence. According to Deborah, Austin hit her multiple times, even giving her a black eye during the incident. Stone Cold didn't deny the accusation, and he was fined $1,000 and sentenced to 80 hours of community service. Amid all this, Vince McMahon had another concern: protecting WWE's image. With Austin being the company's top star, Vince worried about the potential fallout if the public found out about the incident. To keep things under wraps, Vince made Deborah sign a non-disclosure agreement, ensuring she wouldn't reveal the details of what happened. But it wasn't just Austin. There was another top star Vince protected to keep his company going. The Superfly Jimmy Snuka was one of the WWE's top babyfaces in the 1980s, and in 1982 Snuka started dating Nancy Argentino, despite being a married man. Just a year later, when WWF had a show in Pennsylvania, Snuka and his girlfriend stayed at a motel. After the show was done, Snuka returned to his motel and immediately called for an ambulance for his girlfriend Nancy. Tragically, when they arrived at the hospital, Nancy Argentino was pronounced dead. The autopsy revealed that Nancy died from a head injury caused by a collision with a hard object, and her body was covered in bruises, so the coroner marked the death as a homicide, and Snuka was made the prime suspect in the case. However, just a few weeks later, Jimmy Snuka and Vince McMahon would visit the DA's office to discuss the case. And it was after this visit that the case against Snuka lost momentum and was ultimately closed. In 2012, when Snuka released his biography, he mentioned that when they had gone to the DA's office, McMahon apparently carried a briefcase full of cash, but he wasn't sure if it was for Nancy Argentino's family, though Snuka made sure to mention that he was completely innocent. The case was reopened once again in 2015, and this time Snuka was charged with third-degree murder, but the case was dismissed again in 2017, since Snuka was deemed unfit to stand trial due to his declining health, and in the same year, Snuka passed away. While there is no concrete evidence, many believe McMahon may have covered up a murder to protect his top star and, by extension, his business. In the late 80s and early 90s, a scandal rocked the WWF involving accusations against Mel Phillips, Terry Garvin, and Pat Patterson, who were allegedly grooming and abusing young ring boys. What made this even more shocking was that many of the victims were underage. As more victims came forward and spoke out, the WWF found itself under intense scrutiny. So, how did Vince McMahon and the WWF handle this situation? Mel Phillips, a ring announcer for the WWF, was in charge of the Ring Boy program. When the allegations surfaced, you'd think Vince would have fired Phillips on the spot, right? And he did. First. But that's not where the story ends. Phillips was later quietly rehired by the company under the condition that he stayed away from minors. It's clear that justice, responsibility, and safety weren't exactly Vince's priorities. All he seemed to care about was keeping the company running, no matter what. If you look at wrestling today, it has evolved a lot since the golden age of the 1980s. A few decades ago, a big body with muscles was almost essential to becoming a sports entertainer. And the more Herculean the physique, the better the chances the wrestlers had in gaining stardom. Vince McMahon was also a stern believer in this, And that's one of the reasons why he pushed the Herculean Hulk Hogan as the ace of the WWF over other wrestlers who had more technical prowess. However, gaining large muscle mass is not a simple feat, so to get more recognition, wrestlers often used the juice to aid them in gaining bigger bodies. This led to many performers using the drug to boost their physique, and the WWE aided them by providing doctors who would prescribe wrestlers with the juice. And one such doctor was George Zahorian. In the 1990s, as Congress made more serious laws regarding steroid abuse, Zahorian was found guilty of prescribing steroids to wrestlers. As the case against Zahorian was being built, the doctor was given an opportunity to escape if he agreed to help turn in Vince McMahon. As allegations were made towards McMahon, such as Vince forcing and encouraging wrestlers to take the juice and even providing it to them, he was indicted by the U.S. prosecutors as the trial started in 1994. However, most of the wrestlers who came to testify claimed that Vince never forced them to take roids, and due to lack of evidence against the chairman, he was given a not guilty verdict by the jury. This was one of the moments where Vince should have reflected on the ill practices of his company, but instead, he turned a blind eye to all of it, and it would all lead to one of the biggest catastrophes in wrestling, the Benoit tragedy in 2007. In 2007, Chris Benoit, his wife, and his child were found dead in their house, and the investigation concluded that it was Benoit who had committed the murders before taking his own life. However, as more shocking facts came to light, such as Benoit having 40 times the normal amount of testosterone for a man his age and anabolic steroids being found in his house, the inquisitive eyes fell on the WWE. How could a company that claimed to have a wellness policy to monitor substance abuse among its performers allow such an alarming situation to go unchecked? But the chairman refused to take any responsibility, claiming that WWE had no influence on the incident, and subsequently just erased Benoit from its programming. But if Vince had only taken the precautions beforehand, then maybe 2 innocent lives could have been spared. If we had to look back at the genesis of the McMahon character, we'd have to go back to the November of 1997. Bret the Hitman Hart, who had worked for the WWF since 1984 and had become one of the company's top stars, decided to jump ship to WCW in December of 1997. However, since Hart was the current WWF champion, he had to vacate the title before joining the rival company. Vince McMahon discussed the plan for Hart to lose to Michaels at the Survivor Series pay-per-view of November 1997, but Hart refused to drop the title at the event because he didn't want to lose the title to Shawn Michaels, someone with who he had personal animosity with, and especially since the event was taking place in his home Canada. Eventually, all the involved agreed that the match would end in disqualification and that Bret would drop the title a few days after the pay-per-view event and would leave the company on amicable terms. However, as the days to pay-per-view drew closer, McMahon decided it was best to not let Hart walk away with the championship at Survivor Series. On the fated night, as Michaels applied the sharpshooter, Vince signaled to the referee Earl Hebner for the bell, with Michaels being declared the winner without Hart tapping out, leaving everyone confused as to what had happened. As Hart realized that he was double-crossed, he would spit on McMahon's face on live television, and even punched McMahon backstage before leaving the company. This would mark the birth of the chairman's on-screen persona, and he would cement his diabolical character on the next episode of Raw when he was asked why he screwed the Hitman. The narcissistic chairman would explain that it wasn't him who screwed the Hitman. It was Bret who screwed Bret. This McMahon character, who was an important part of the Attitude and Ruthless Aggression era, was the embodiment of unhinged, controversial, and edgy.
I'm not in Texas. I'm in Afghanistan. Hey boys, check it out. There's a member of the Taliban.
During this period, many segments with McMahon were downright ugly, heinous, and in the current day and age would have probably canceled the WWE. Just like when The Undertaker chose Vince McMahon to be his opponent for a Buried Alive match in the 2003 Survivor Series pay-per-view, The scared McMahon tried to find ways to escape the situation by requesting SmackDown general manager Paul Heyman to help him. When Paul Heyman refused, the chairman would throw a fit and say that he hoped terrorists would burn down The Undertaker's house, that his children would get kidnapped, and
his wife, she's gonna be by a motorcycle gang right in front of The Undertaker.
But Vince's shenanigans didn't end there. During a backstage segment at the Survivor Series pay-per-view in 2005, Vince McMahon used the N-word on live television with Booker T and his wife within earshot. This moment drew widespread criticism from fans, with WWE explaining that it was merely a skit performed by characters, not real people, much like in movies and TV. Critics argued that using such language, especially by the company's owner, demonstrated troubling values and a lack of awareness regarding racial sensitivity in entertainment. The writing on the wall was always there, considering Vince McMahon's history of sexualizing female talent and using them for on-screen storylines. So it's not far-fetched to believe that his real personality could be even darker. The first ever allegations made towards the chairman would date as far back as 1986, when the first female referee of the WWF, Rita Chatterton, accused the chairman of forcing her to do oral sex. But when she resisted, McMahon assaulted her. Chatterton went public with her story in 1992, but with WWF already entangled in other scandals, her claims were largely ignored. Until 2022. It is important to note that in these 30 years, Vince has been accused twice, once in 2006 by a tanning salon employee, and in another case by a manager of a spa in 2011. However, these cases escaped much of the public eye. But in 2022, McMahon would find his entire world come crashing down, as it was revealed that over the years the chairman made $12 million in payments to 4 women to buy their silence from discussing their relationship with the owner. Reports also surfaced that Vince had settled with Rita Chatterton with a multi-million-dollar agreement over her previous allegations. Vince's legal team explained that he still denied Rita's allegations, but settled to avoid legal costs. Amid all the chaos, McMahon was forced to retire in 2022, but Vince being Vince, seized control over his empire again in 2023. But in the very next year, Vince would again be accused by former WWE paralegal Janelle Grant, and this time, the details were more darker and harrowing than anyone's wildest imagination. Janelle Grant filed a lawsuit against Vince McMahon, accusing him of treating her like a toy, trafficking her to other employees, sharing private photos of her, and threatening to fire her if she didn't comply with his disturbing demand. Vince McMahon may have resigned as the executive chairman of TKO, and is in the process of selling off all his shares, signaling the end of his storied run. But knowing Vince, it's hard not to imagine him watching all the news unfold, grinning slyly and whispering to himself, "No chance in hell." If you've enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to WrestleFaction for more awesome wrestling content.